Hi, Dr. Katie here. I wanted to talk about why it is so hard to stick to a diet long term. We all know that diets work really well at getting weight off. There's lots of diets out there, fad diets, whatever you want to call it. And the average American goes on like 7 diet attempts per year, which is kind of crazy. And so we're all really good at dieting, but we're not good at keeping it off long term. Less than 1% of people who lose all their excess weight actually keep it off long term, for more than a year, which is dismal, right? So there's something broken about the way we're approaching this issue. And I imagine that you may be in that same boat. Maybe you've tried several different things to get the weight off, and maybe you've been successful at getting the weight off, but then you're back at square one because it's all come back, or you've gone back to your previous eating habits for whatever reason. And it's because we are looking at the food and not looking at our brains and how our habits determine our destiny, really. The food part of it is really kind of like a technical problem, whereas the behaviors that we come to the table with in terms of our eating are a behavioral problem. Okay, so if we don't address how our brain is sabotaging us in our attempts to lose weight and get healthy and feel better in our bodies, our long-term goals, if we don't address that, then it's not going to work over the long term. Okay. When we go on a diet or try to just use our willpower to change our eating habits for the better, it will work for a short period of time. But our willpower is a finite resource. Okay. It's a bucket full of water, and as you use it, it depletes and then it's gone. Okay, it's replenishable, but it's a finite resource, and that comes from our higher brains up here in our prefrontal cortex. Whereas the habits that we hold in regards to really everything we do, all of our habits, but we're talking about our habits in terms of how we eat, are housed in our lower brain, which is kind of down here. That in that part of the brain, we call it the primitive brain, is responsible for our survival. Okay, it keeps us alive, it keeps us breathing. It's responsible for making us eat food and not starve to death, and all those other kind of habits that keep us alive. And that there's no willpower. It's automatic. Those are processes that happen without us even thinking about it, right? Like, do we think about breathing? No. And so when we establish habits around how we eat, whether that's like we overeat or we're, every 2 minutes going to the kitchen to get a cookie because we're bored or stressed or whatever, like those are habits and those are neural pathways that have been established in our brain. And the more and more we do them, the more automatic they become and the more entrenched they become in our lower brain. Okay, so when that habit pops up and your brain is telling you, hey, go eat this thing that you shouldn't, then your higher brain and your lower brain are at odds with one another. They're fighting a battle. And who is going to win ultimately? Your higher brain may win the battle now and then, but who's really going to win the war? All right. The one with infinite resources to keep you alive and keep you doing the things that your lower brain thinks you need to do in order to not die. Right? Okay. It's faulty wiring. Of course, you don't need to overeat to not die, but your lower brain doesn't know the difference. Okay. So, in those battles, your lower brain's going to win out in the long run every time. And that is why it is so hard to just use our willpower to just change the way we eat, change our habits, and maintain them long term, because it's a finite resource and it's going to lose out to our lower brain every time. Okay, so it's not your fault. It's not because you lack willpower or you lack self-control or you just need to be more disciplined. It's not about that. It's about retraining our brains so that they support our long-term goals and the habits that we want to have instead of fighting against it. Okay, and that is what we need to do for lifelong healthy eating, managed weight, and vibrant, energetic health in our bodies without even having to think about it, with it being just easy and automatic. All right. And more on that to come, but that's why it's so hard to diet and stick to a diet long term and keep it off.